Don't be the firefighter or especially an officer who's overwhelmed when you arrive on scene and can't be depended on. Split Second Leadership is a mini course that provides you with the tools and framework to be the go-to leader when it's on the line and seconds count. Check it out at firegroundcompany.com. Also check out our free size up guide. Stumbling on a size up and not knowing how to prioritize your actions on the fireground will make everyone second guess your abilities. Our free 10-page size up and initial action guide gets you off to the right start from the moment you show up. All of this and more available at firegroundcompany.com.
On today's episode of the Fireground Company podcast, we're talking about what not to do as a new officer and how to set yourself and your crew up for success.
The Fireground Company podcast.
So we've discussed some of these concepts and principles of a new officer, and a new officer can be newly promoted. It could be transferred to a new company, a new firehouse, a new situation, whether that be because you're new to the role or new to the firehouse. And it's particularly timely for us right now.
Yeah, it is.
There's been a relatively big shakeup of personnel. There's also been a lot of new promotions. So basically, there's going to be a lot of people finding themselves in new roles with new crews and new dynamics. And we've discussed outside of the podcast, we've discussed a lot. This kind of reset is an opportunity to take stock of things and get the motivation amped up again.
Yeah, refocus, reset. Yeah.
And things change. People's lives change.
Yeah.
You know, we talked in some of the other episodes about, talking to some of our people, what matters to you, what are you trying to do with your career, and that changes. That's a reoccurring process, right? Because people are at different places in their lives. So anyway, it is a good opportunity to talk about this situation of coming into a new crew, whether that's because you just got promoted or because you got transferred or whatever it is. And like I said, it's timely for us because we are having a lot of discussions about all of the dynamics of the new relationships and everything. But this is true across the board. And, I think in most departments, when you get promoted, you end up at a new firehouse. There's not a lot of places where you promote in place, but even if you do promote in place, whether it's in
At least a new shift, a lot of times, even if it's a smaller department, you end up maybe on a newer shift.
Even in like volunteer departments where you get promoted, it's still a new role, and there's a new dynamic there.
Yeah.
And so I think what we kind of want to talk about today is some ways to make the best of that situation. And also, if you read the title of this, what not to do if you don't want to go in there and screw up this opportunity.
Yeah, it's a moment in time you can't necessarily get back. Can you correct it? Yeah, you can, but if you can, you want to get it right. When you go in there, it's a new beginning and everything else. And I wish some of the stuff we're going to talk about, I wish I knew earlier on in my career, but that's just the way it is. So if you're new in your career, as far as in that role, that leadership role, whatever that may be, these are some of the things that can be helpful to you that I wish someone had told me. So, when you first start interacting with a new crew, you have that moment to, sit down, maybe bring everyone together and talk about, hey, this is the direction we're going to go in. And you got to be measured. You got to be a little careful with that. And, you can go in there and they have a way of doing things, right? They already have something established, especially if they have been together and you're the new piece. You may be coming in there with some other people or whatever. But a lot of times these are situations where, for the most part, that crew is already established their culture on their shift and maybe their little traditions and whatever that is, their stuff. So you're going in as an outsider, even if you know some of the people or whatever, it's their world you're entering, and they may not want to change anything, right? You may, and you're not necessarily looking for anything to change, but most likely there is some stuff that's going to change with any kind of movement of transfers and promotions and all that. So you're coming in there. They may not want to change anything. They may be happy with whatever they're doing, whether it's good, bad, somewhere in the middle. And you're an outsider, and you come in with your reputation, right? Regardless of what you were before, whether you were a firefighter or promoted from a lieutenant to a captain, whatever that is. There's probably most likely, unless you're these really big departments, there's something, you have some reputation. And it's kind of one of those things, you think about it like you have a good reputation. And if you have a good reputation, you think, well, isn't that going to make things easier for me? Not necessarily. I mean, let's be honest. Every crew isn't, go-getters. Every crew isn't crushing it. There's some crews that are struggling. There's some crews that are disasters. That's that's the real world. I mean, we were just at training days, and a lot of times when you're listening to the different presenters and everything else, people are speaking to that the good crews and all that, but man, everyone, come on, we all know there are some disasters out there. So if you have a good reputation and you're coming in there and that crew is a bit of a mess, you you got to right that ship, but you got to be careful about it, because they're going to have their shields up and they're like, oh, this guy, he thinks he knows everything and he's going to, be a jerk to us and this and that. So even a good reputation can sometimes be detrimental with a bad crew to win them over. And I think that's a hard concept for people to understand. And you could be coming in there with not a great reputation, whether that's justified or not. It is a chance to reset that for whatever reason. If you've made some mistakes previously, this is an opportunity. And something like that, I would address head on. If you had some other problems, you're like, look, this happened before. I know this is probably out there, but that's in the past. And what I want to do is this. I want to make, this situation the best it can possibly be. So it's probably good if you address that. So be aware that you're coming with the reputation. And as we said, this is a great opportunity for that reset and that new beginning, right?
Yeah. So, all right, let's get practical here. Day one, right? 'Cause that's I love what you said, that this is a moment in time that you can't get back. And as soon as you show up at the firehouse that morning, it's on, right?
Yep.
So talk to me about some things you should and shouldn't do.
Yeah. One of the things that comes up a lot is, should you plant your flag on day one? And what I mean by that is, should you come out day one, boom, these are my expectations. I can't say 100% one way or the other. I lean towards, most of the time, don't do that. I think that just doesn't play well. I think that's kind of, we talked about previously being a little bit of a movie character sometimes. You may have to do that. Things, maybe in a certain situation, there's such a wreck that you got to say, hey, look, these are my expectations. I would say, though, most of the time, don't do that on day one, because you don't know exactly what's going on and you don't necessarily see all the good and the bad. So, if you have the generic set of expectations, one, no one cares about those. And, haven't you gotten them right? I know, right? Have there been some officers in your career where they've given you a sheet of paper? I mean, has that happened to you? It's happened to me.
Yes.
And it's like, what do we do? We're like, okay, I want you to wear your uniform. I want you to turn out quickly for call. Yes, we know.
Yeah.
We know all that.
It kind of feels like somebody handing me prenuptials on a first date.
Yeah, that's
It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
interesting.
Yeah. Let's just talk first. Let's
Yeah.
have some dinner.
Well, it becomes almost like white noise sometimes, because if you're listing stuff, normal stuff, like be in your, turn out quickly, wear your uniform, pay attention to the radio. You know what I mean? If it's that kind of the white noise kind of stuff, that those may not be the problems or the issues there. If you sit back a little and just kind of pay attention and then eventually get to that, you can zero in on some of the issues there that you're like, well, this is an issue. I need to actually say this is my expectation. I thought, because what'll happen is I thought that they would uh, know this, and you think it's obvious, but they're not doing that. So I think that's, to me, I have given, and with our crew, I had like a company operations book, or it was a bunch of just different drills I did, and just something on paper people can reference. And I did have expectations on there, but they were more broad. Stuff along the lines that solve problems at the lowest level. And also, as an officer, I think you start to have your expectations become personal. They're things that you may have strengths where you can address things easier right off the bat, or there's things that really irritate you that you want to make known. But
Mhm.
I'm not a big fan of the first day that throw those down on a piece of paper. I think you got to kind of get there, and we'll in a few minutes we'll talk about a way to deal with that. But that's one of those things in general. I would say don't jump right into that. Take things in and see what needs to be changed, because there's some things that may need to be tweaked, and you have to figure out also how are you going to get buy-in from this crew. You got to pay attention a little, and that's one of the things you have to start asking yourself and thinking about. How do you want to go about that? Because it's going to be different for every group of people you're with. If you do the wrong thing and come on too strong and be a little unrealistic with what you want from this group of people, you kind of dig yourself a hole, and it's hard to get out of that. So that's all I'm saying. Be cautious with some of that. So I guess, now we'll get into some of the, how to's, I
Yeah.
guess.
So what do you do instead?
I would say start with something along the lines of this, and you can put this into your own words. Say something like, "Hey, I'm looking forward to working with you guys, doing some good things here. I'm probably going to make some changes, but I want to get settled first, see how things are going, and just, bear with me for the, first couple weeks, and we'll figure out, maybe what we need to do, and I'll let you know some of the things that may be a little different from how you guys have operated in the past." I think that's just a better way, because one, you're buying yourself time saying, look, I'm going to observe and see what's going on. And I probably am going to make some changes. I'm just not going to make them today. And if you do that, you're putting them on notice. So maybe a month from now, 6 weeks from now, you do switch something up. It's not out of nowhere where they're, well, what the heck, man? I thought we're doing stuff. It's like people start reading into it. But if you said, hey, look, we're probably going to make some changes in the future, they're a little more at ease with that when that happens. It's just, I've noticed that plays out a little better. So that's, to me, one of the things you want to say at the very beginning. Just, be positive about working with a new group. I'm looking forward to this, and, want to do some good things here, and, probably going to make some changes, but not necessarily right now. So just, give me a little time to get settled.
Yeah.
Say it in your own way, but that's the message you want to communicate.
And that gives you a little time to, because you mentioned, when you come in, you're an outsider. 6 weeks, you're not necessarily completely ingrained in that culture yet, but you're less of an outsider, right? You've worked with them, you've seen it. So now, as opposed to day one, as you said, planting your flag, give yourself a little time, just kind of exist with these fellas for a while, and then when the changes come, it's kind of like, it can be a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I think is really important is avoid comparisons to where you came from, whether it was a good firehouse, a good shift, or a bad firehouse, a bad shift. The that You got to be careful with that. Um, on the side of, if you're coming from a good spot, and you kind of reference that good spot, that's going to put people off. They're going to say, well, you're here with us now. What, do you think those guys are better than us? How are you going to get buy-in from the people you're with if you're referencing how great your other shift is or how great your firehouse is? That doesn't matter anymore. Guess what? You're not part of that firehouse anymore. You're part of this firehouse, and you want to make this firehouse successful. You don't want to, that's, you're looking in the past. It's cool you did some good stuff over there, but you want to do some good stuff here. And also, the flip side of that is if you were in a bad spot and there were some problems over there, and now you're in this spot and it's better or it's okay. But if you start bad mouthing where you came from, what are they going to think? They're going to say, oh, what does this guy say behind my back?
Mhm.
You're not going to get by in that way. You're not going to accomplish what you want to accomplish there. So it's you got to be careful with that. And I mean, and again, if someone brings it up directly to you, because that may happen, someone may say, "Oh, we're not like whatever that company, blah 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 blah." Just say something along the lines. Again, put this in your own words, but look, this is my focus is here, and the future of this shift in this firehouse. That I'm not over there anymore. I'm here. This is what matters to me. So that's what I care about. That's what I'm focused on. Again, your own, like I said, your own words. You have to put this in your own words.
Something else I've heard you talk about before is sitting down with members, because anybody who's been in a firehouse knows there's sort of a crew personality that with all the guys together, they kind of form this personality of a crew, but each member individually has things going on too. So how do you build those relationships, not just with the crew as a whole, but with individuals?
Yeah, going back to when we started, we kind of made that broad statement. I'm looking forward to working with you and all that. And you can bring some of this stuff up when you're talking to the whole crew, but a lot of times people aren't going to open up, especially if you're new to that group of people in a group environment, right? And they can sit back and not say anything. You have some people that they're not going to talk very much, right? So I think to me, this is one of these, this is a must for the most part, is you got to sit down with each person individually and figure out where they're at. So, bring them into a meeting where it's just, just the two of you, sit down with them and, start off by figuring out what their goals are. And, the operational goals, the goals of the job is what I'm talking about. So, what do they want to do? Are they, pursuing, tech rescue or hazmat, water rescue, a promotion? Do they want to transfer for whatever reason? Or do they just want to maintain where they're at right now? Figure out what their goals are in relation to that. And that gives you an idea of, okay, well, this is where this person's coming from. This is what their focus is going to be. And you can tell them, look, I'm going to try and help you with that the best I can. I mean, if you have some connections or experience and something they're interested in, cool, use that to help them out. And then also, start talking to them about, what they got going on and, personal life. So if they got some issues or something, and the way to deal with that is say, hey, do you have anything going on outside the firehouse that, I need to be aware of that, is there childcare issues or something dicey going on with your marriage or something like that? Because if you're aware of that, you can also tell them, hey, look, if you give me a heads up about this right now, I can kind of soften maybe how this plays out in the department if there's any issues with schedules and stuff like that. So just it tells you where that person's coming from, and just really helps you start connecting with people. I would say also, in this meeting, what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out their likes and dislikes. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is what motivates them, what matters most to them, or not necessarily most, but what's something that they enjoy or maybe want. And some of this can be in relation to the downtimes at the firehouse, or we talk about how when we first started working together, I did this. I brought you guys all in, and I remember talking to you. And one of the things that stuck out is you mentioned you like to have an opportunity to work out, and it's cool. And that's if we get all the stuff, the drilling and all the other stuff done, I'm going to do whatever I can to help provide a time and opportunity for you to work out, because obviously that also helps on the job to be in shape, fit, and everything else. And I'm just it's respectful of you. That's something that you told me. So I'm like, okay, that's something I can do. I can make that, I can work that. Or sometimes on the weekends, guys are like, hey, you can pick up on, they like watching their team play or something like that. If you get the drills done, the work in the firehouse done early in the day, then you can, on the weekend allow some time for stuff in the afternoon for them to relax and everything else. So pay attention to those kind of things too. And, overall finding out what motivates people is I don't know. It can be hard. I mean, it sometimes takes me a while, man.
Mm.
And it's so different for everyone. And I remember I was working at a firehouse, and I did not have the best of crews, the best of buy-in, and I'm just trying to find something. And another company down the street that I had one of my good friends in, um, we turned out quick, things worked out, and we beat them into their area. And I knew it drove my friend nuts, friendly competition. And I was kind of laughing about it to the person that was driving for me, and they loved that. All of a sudden, they just lit up because I think whatever that was, they liked that I was happy that we beat in, one of my friends, and he just did not like that. So, and I realized, I was like, I got something here. I was like, okay. So, I just played that up a little, and that got that person. Now they're turning out a lot faster. They, were trying to make sure they knew the running routes. And it's one of those things you just sometimes happen upon, and you're not, it just, there it is. All right. So now I got something I can use. So sometimes if you find out by accident, you just have to have that awareness.
Yeah, and I think that's the key word is awareness. We talk about that a lot with people just being generally aware of what's going on around them, and also like taking the chance to observe. We were talking before we came in here about how I think a lot of times newly promoted officers especially are so concerned with how they look, and
Yeah.
how do I look in front of the guys, how do I look in front of my superior officers, all of this stuff, and that they are so just overwhelmed by their own image that they don't have any space to just sit back and observe. And I think if you have been promoted and you're confident in your abilities, sometimes the best action is to just step back a little bit and observe, gather information,
Yeah.
figure out what's going on. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, keep an eye on how you're presenting yourself to everybody around you, but you need leave a little space in your brain to be aware and observe the people that you're working with, not just the people that you're working for.
Or you could do this as a group, but again, I would say do this individually. Is ask them if they would like to make any changes or they have any concerns in the firehouse. They may volunteer that in the group setting, but I think there's a better opportunity in the one-on-one. If, hey, how things going in the firehouse? Do you think there's any changes we need to make or anything that needs to be addressed, or do you have any concerns about anything? Some people mostly are probably not going to say anything, but you'll probably get at least one person that'll say something, and it may be kind of nonsense. And you're just like, okay, yeah, you got to be respectful still because they volunteered that. But sometimes you'll get a read into what actually is going on, some problems and stuff like that. But don't get too. Someone may say something. Again, this is where it goes back to get more information. Someone may say there's an issue in the firehouse. Be careful jumping right on that. Talk to some other people, figure out if that truly is a problem from everyone's perspective or the majority of the members' perspective, because this may be something that person that's just, it's their thing. And if you go to lean too hard into that, it may not work out well. So make note of that and gather a little more information from other people in the firehouse. I think that can be a helpful thing.
Yeah, you want to be careful not to win the wrong battle.
Yeah. I guess I say this a lot. You're saying I say this a lot. I don't know, maybe on the podcast or also just when we work together, is don't use leadership capital on the little things.
I mean, I like that term, leadership capital. It really conveys a lot of what all of this is about. So first, tell me what is leadership capital?
Yeah. The way I look at leadership capital is almost, maybe an easy example is it's kind of like, yeah, you have a pile of money, right? I have a pile of money. I have $100 and that's all I got. So if I spend all $100 on candy, I don't have anything to eat, real food. I don't got any, real food to eat or anything else. So you got to be careful. Your leadership capital equates to your influence, right? People think that, uh, we just give, if I'm an officer, I just give an order and they do that. Come on. We know that's not the case. You can tell someone to do something, and if they don't like it, they may not do it well. They may make the situation more difficult for you and everything else. So if you're spending leadership capital on, nitpicking the little things, it's hard if you're constantly telling someone, do this, do this, do this, do this. Sometimes you got to let some of the little stuff go. And that's, again, this is going to be different everywhere. I mean, some places, I use uniforms a lot because it's an easy thing that everyone can relate to. There's some places uniforms are a really big thing. It's it's just the culture. That's the way it is. And if someone's outside, not in uniform, that needs to be addressed immediately. Other places, it's not. It's like, hey, if you just kind of in the ballpark, as far as maybe have something that says fire department on, you're good to go. So it depends, and you're gonna know this in your situation, but you got to pick and choose. It's kind of like picking and choosing your battles. If you go after too many things, you may get to a point where all this little stuff you're making a big deal. Now this actually is a big deal operationally, or can get someone hurt, and they're just tired of listening to you. It's the white noise thing. They're done. So that's why sitting back, paying attention, and then giving your expectations a little later and deciding on the things that you need to change a little later, that's going to help you, because you can divide up that leadership capital on what really matters with that group of people and that firehouse. So let them, as much as possible. I'm a big believer in, and this comes from the way I was kind of brought up in the fire department, of give the firefighters in the company the ability to make as many decisions as possible of all the day-to-day stuff. So unless you got to manage, like, when to eat, um, how to do the meals, stuff like that. I mean, if you have a day going on where you have stuff on the schedule, yeah, you may have to get involved, but give them the option. Say, a lot of times as simple as, hey, when do you want to go to the store in the morning? I don't have anything going on, so I'm asking you, and you're like, all right, yeah, we can go at 9:30 or whatever. I was like, cool. Or if I got something, hey, how about 9:45? I got a phone call, or I got to get with this guy about something. I'm giving that to you. I'm not getting involved in all that little stuff. You have, the common stuff that people call, I don't know, all different things like you buy, like the food in the pantry, like the snacks, and it's called all different things across the country, like the brand of coffee we buy, or whatever that may be, the stuff that you throw in for the firehouse, the commonly used stuff. Don't get into the weeds on a lot of that stuff, especially when you're new to the firehouse. If whatever they want to buy and do, and pick out all that little stuff, the day-to-day things, let them do that. When they want to watch the rig, stuff like that, if it's not dirty and it doesn't have to be done right now, you may want to point out, like, hey fellas, this is can we maybe knock this out in the morning? But if it's something like, hey, we just wash the rigs usually every day, just let them make those decisions. Because if you're letting them make those decisions, they're kind of in control of their destiny. So it's easier for you to then make the bigger decisions, or some of the harder ones. They're going to listen to you more. But if you're telling them everything to do, when to wash the rig, when to, when you're going to go to the store, and for no good reason, you're wasting your leadership capital, man, and they're not going to listen.
Yeah, somebody recently just said, if you chase two rabbits, they both get away.
Yeah.
So don't chase multiple rabbits, spending up all of your leadership capital. Pick the one that you want to catch, and catch that, and then be okay maybe if the other one gets away.
Yeah. Again, let them make as many of the little decisions as possible, man. It's going to make them happy. They feel like they're more in more control. And then another one here I would say is pay attention to everything. That, I know that sounds a little overwhelming, right? Pay attention to everything. Don't go crazy with this, but pay attention to what's going on, man. That's one of those things. If you constantly are paying attention, you can kind of read people, and you said something and you're like, it didn't seem like the response that I wanted. I didn't quite, there's some eye rolling and some other stuff. And that's a clue. Something's off. And, maybe they're wrong, but maybe you're wrong. You at least have to ask that question and dive into that a little more and figure out what's going on. So you really need to pay attention to everything that's going on, and look for those clues. Don't go crazy about it and drive yourself nuts, but just the main thing is don't close yourself off where you stop caring about what they think and how they're reacting to how you're spending your leadership capital.
Yeah.
And I guess last, I would say, let the culture of the crew develop naturally, but still guide it in the right direction. So don't try, if there was a culture, again, going back to if you're coming from another place, another firehouse, another shift, don't try and take that culture that developed there and ram that down the throats of the people that you're working with now. They're different, man. People are different. You can still have a good culture, and it's different than this one. And that's what I realized. There was, I guess, early on in my career, oh man, I don't know. It must have been the first probably 6, 7 years of my career. Once I got promoted, I was transferred as an officer almost every year. So I was just bouncing back and forth. And that's where I learned a lot of this stuff, because I made a lot of these mistakes. And I realized over time that the culture of, for this crew to be successful, the culture has to be a little different. And I can't just ram down what we did somewhere else. I got to figure out what works here. So let that develop naturally and just guide it a little. And some people, they look at us, our relationship in the firehouse and the way our culture is, and they say, well, I want that. And it's like they don't understand, dude. You're looking at 8 years in almost. It didn't start this way, dude. I started by exactly what I just said here, asking some of these questions, sitting down with everyone. Some of the stuff we do, how we do meals, how the firehouse runs, that developed over time
Mhm.
by giving you the ability to make those decisions, and then my input on some of that, and spending my leadership capital in the right places. So don't think you don't have to get, to this point where someone else is 8 years in. It's gonna look different, and it's gonna take time. It doesn't happen overnight. So it's okay, man. It's okay. Let it develop.
I know it's been said many times, and we just heard some great minds at training days say similar things, but firefighting really is a team sport. And any new officer has to kind of take stock of what they've got to work with and use that to build a successful company. And we've all seen it. There's guys who come in and they do the whole like new sheriff in town bit, and they're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be a strong leader. It doesn't mean you can't be confident, set standards, establish expectations, all that. It just means that you've got to throw awareness, smarts, and honestly, sometimes creativity into your approach too. And I mean, I get it. It may not have always been this way, but I mean, that's the reality that we're working with
Mhm.
today. You've got to remember that even the busiest firehouses in the nation still spend a great deal of time at the firehouse. So I think a lot of new officers get wrapped up in how they'll perform on the fireground,
Mhm.
and rightly so. I mean, that's the priority mission, right? But the reality is you're going to find yourself leading the firehouse just as much,
Mhm.
and that matters too. So you've got to think about firehouse tactics as well as fireground tactics. And once you're established in a firehouse and that culture has matured, I think you can let the culture speak for itself a bit more. But when you're new to a house, which is what we're talking about today, you may have to observe more closely, think more deliberately, and really pay attention to what makes that crew tick, and I think that that can kind of seem overwhelming. Like we said, it seems like a lot because we're listening to things we're saying, pay attention to everything, all this stuff. It seems like a lot, but it's you put the work in on the front end. It's like you said at the beginning of the episode, this is a moment in time that you can't get back. So you put this work in the beginning, you observe, you pay attention. kind of follow some of these guidelines that can set you up for success. And over time, that part of it gets a little bit easier for you. It's like being a rookie, right? I always, when
Hmm.
I talk to rookies, I'm always like, look, put in the work for this first 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
and it'll pay off later. And I mean, kind of, a new assignment or being a new officer is a similar way. It's like, look, it's not going to be this way forever. If you put the work in, you establish this culture, eventually it's going to get humming on its own and you don't have to tend to it like a fire, all the work of building a fire is a campfire, that is, um, is in the beginning, right? You have to stoke it, you have to do all this stuff, but once it gets burning, it's just kind of tending to it lightly and letting it kind of burn on its own. And that's similar to the culture of a firehouse. Is you put in this work in the beginning, you observe, you kind of play it in a smart and creative way, and eventually you build something that runs on its own.
Here's something else I just want to say is this is encouragement for people that may not be going into a great spot because you're not always going to be in a great spot. I learned as an officer early on in my career a lot from the bad spots, almost more from the bad spots than I did at the good spots because it really, I had to be on, man. My game, I had to be ready because you go to some of these spots that aren't the greatest, and the firefighters, the skills aren't as good. They, don't follow directions as well. So you really start to learn how to deal with people and figure out how to kind of corral everyone and then get them going in the right direction. And, that it's, I learned a lot, man. And you're really on your own sometimes. You show up and you're like, wow, I got nothing as far as I can't, this person knows a lot less than me. They don't really care very much. And I was like, I got to figure out how to do this. So I learned a lot about people from some of the bad spots and how to deal with that. So when I did get to the better assignments, the I just those skills that I learned, I just had to, implement a little bit of it. I didn't have to turn it full on, dial it all the way up. I just had to like, oh, I just need to say this, maybe, guide this person a little bit in this direction. And when it was in the rough spots, the bad companies, it was like, wow, man, I got to figure this out. So that's my encouragement. If you're somewhere where it's not considered a great spot, you can learn a lot if you look at it that way. Don't close yourself off. Don't give up. Figure out how to deal with people. You're almost always going to have a firefighter that is going to have some struggles, or a firefighter that's not performing the way you want them to perform, even in the best of places. So you're going to learn how to do that when you're in a place that really may not have anyone that's, into the job, or there's a lot of problems there with skills and taking care of the firehouse, whatever. You're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn a lot about leadership. Don't give up. Keep trying different things. Some stuff's going to work, some stuff's not, and that's okay, man. But you're building for the future. That's the best way I could tell, someone to look at it. And that's what I did, and it helped me a lot.
I think that's great advice, and I think that's a good point to exit the episode on. What do you think?
Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for listening.
Check us out at firegroundcompany.com. You'll find links to all our social media accounts and our YouTube channel, and you'll stay up to date on everything we're working on. We also have a store on our website where you can support us as we grow this community, plus working on some great courses to help you strengthen your leadership in the fire department and support its traditions and culture. Last but not least, subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, leave a comment, spread the word. Get this out to the firefighters who are hungry to make the job even better.
The Fireground Company Podcast.